Drums. Hey everybody, I want to have a discussion today about drums. Okay, often I get asked how I record my drums. Um, I am proud of the way that my drums sound in my recordings. And over the past few months, a lot of people have asked me how I record my drums. Now, as you know, I think it's pretty evident in my music um, with my project Squire's Cape that I appreciate the way that Kevin Parker records his drums. Now, I know that on the last two albums that he produced and mixed himself, or probably had limited help with, or what have you, um, that some of those are probably sampled, probably from his kit and sequenced on something. Um, Maybe Ableton or whatever, or a sequencer, an outboard sequencer or whatever. I don't know how he's doing it now. I can tell you, well, I don't know for a fact, but I think that those drums have been recorded by him, cut up, treated, and sequenced. And I think it's better for consistency. You know, if you're going for a project that's as big as he has now, I think that consistency needs to be there. But I'm talking mostly about how he used to record his drums. So now we know that Dave Fridman mixed and helped produce, some of the first two albums, or most of it on there, I guess. We don't really know how much of it he did or didn't. I have reason to believe that some of those tracks actually went to tape, the ones that he mixed. But we'll get into that another time. But basically, I want to talk about how drums are recorded here, and I think it might relate to some of the things that he used to do, and also I'm going to give a couple of tips and tricks away. Like I said, I'm pretty proud of the way that my drums sound. So the first thing I want to do is let's look at the kit. I'm going to turn the camera around and I'm going to be pointing at some of the things on my kit. So here we have the kit. Okay, the first thing about this kit is it's not a very expensive kit. It's just a Tama from the mid 90s. It's nothing special, okay? But what makes it special is actually this right here. It's a Ludwig Superphonic snare drum. Now, this is definitely a snare drum that Kevin uses. He uses a 6.5 inch. I think this is a 5 1/4. But nonetheless, if you want any good drum sound, that's the snare drum. I mean, there are others that probably sound better, but for me, this works. Now, this one particularly, a little bit different than some of the newers. It has a damper on it, which is a felt pad that's underneath the top skin, and you can raise and lower the tension on that to suppress the ring on the top head. Now, that's very important. This one particularly is from 1978, I think. That's what I was told from the drum shop that I bought it from. But that makes a huge difference. Okay, so that's really important. So that way you don't have to put a cloth over it or put gels on the skin. That felt damper makes a huge improvement on the way that you record and the way that your drums sound when you're recording them. Now, obviously, I have an M81 microphone on the top, and I have a Beta 58A underneath. Now, that's one thing about recording drums. You definitely need two mics on the snare. This one is the phase is shifted on it, so the polarity is different, and that way these two don't cancel one another out. And you can do that in your DAW, which I'm going to show you how that works. Another thing that I found is really important is if you look at my kit, you'll notice throughout the whole kit, that mind the shield. Sorry about that. But you can notice that all of my drums, they don't have any bottom skins and rings on them. Okay, and the reason why I do that is because when I'm tuning the top head and there's no resonant head underneath, I don't have to compete with tuning both. I can make this as dead or as damp as I want, and I don't have to worry about any harmonics or undertones or resonating or any of that underneath there. And a lot of people will even actually take a microphone and stick it up in the drum so that they actually get the attack on the top head. And that's basically what you're doing when you have a microphone inside of your kick drum pointed directly at the batter head, because you're trying to get that attack, the snap, when you record it. And that's important. I do have stereo overheads, one of which is a large diaphragm tube condenser. It's a Rode NT2A, and I have a ribbon microphone on the left. The reason why I do that is because when I'm recording my cymbals, obviously, I want it to be a little bit more padded. I don't want them to be so bright, and that is why I choose a ribbon microphone for my left side overhead. And of course, you have to make sure that, read up on your couple of different ways that you can mic up a drum kit, but one of them, like Glyn Johns or whatever, is like you make sure that your kick drum mic and your top left overhead and your right overhead are equidistant, in a triangle shape, and you can use like a mic wire or a piece of string to, make sure that they're all in equal position in a triangle like that. Okay, that's really important, obviously. Do your research on miking techniques. Okay, obviously experiment with your room, with where the mics go on the kit. Okay, that's important, obviously. Just do a little bit of reading about what techniques you can try, which is probably less important than the way that you treat your drums, which is what we're going to talk about now in the DAW. So here is my drum takes. Okay, and the first thing that you notice is that I'm obviously using 6 microphones, and we went over that a second ago. Now, each one of these, every single one of them, they have what's called a FET compressor on them. So if I bring up my take lanes here, you'll notice that on every single one of my tracks, all the way down on my drum tracks, I hit them with a FET style compressor, which is an 1176 up front. You can see where my settings are at. I don't have them, the attack cranked down too much, but one of the keys here is that, I don't know if you can see this or not, but I'm at 510 milliseconds on my release time, which is important. The input is obviously how hard you're hitting the compressor with the microphone. So you're going to want to, bring your input up pretty high, so that way you get a lot of action on this compressor. So that's the first thing that I do, is I hit every one of those with a FET style compressor. Now, another thing that most people don't understand, and here's the big tip. You probably know all that other shit that I just told you, but that's just obvious stuff, and I'm just running through it from the top down. But here's the kicker, right? Are you ready? Okay. Look. So here are my 6 drum tracks. These are the ones that I use to record this information here, right? But if you look over here, these on Sonar are called patch points, these 4 tracks. And they're basically like buses for your drums. Okay, so I take all 6 of my drum tracks and I put them to 4 different patch points. Now, this is what's really like what I'm trying to get at here. One of these is dry. This is just the overall stereo sound of all the drums. The next one is the same thing duplicated, but on this one I have an additional FET compressor. And on the third one, this is another duplication, and this is where I put my reverb. And here's a fourth one. This is where I put my my modulation. Okay, so the reason why I do this here is because I don't want the compressor and the reverb and my modulation all stacked together when I'm using plugins like this. I want individual control over the amount of regular sounding kit that I have, my compressed kit, my reverbed kit, and my modulated kit. Now, another reason why I do this is because I want to be able to filter the amount of sound by EQ that goes to each one of these. I don't want the whole, bass and floor tom and all that to get reverb on it, nor do I want my flanger or phaser to have bass in it. So I roll off my reverb and my I roll off my bass frequencies on my reverb and my modulation bus pretty hard, because I want only high frequencies to get phased or flanged. I don't want my kick drum to be phased or flanged, because I want that to remain very tight and heavy and consistent. So this is obviously what we call parallel compression, meaning we have a standard drum take and a compressed drum take both playing at the same time. But you'll notice I have all 4 of them playing at the same time. And that is what I'll refer to as stacking my drum buses. I don't know what it's really called. I mean, don't fault me for not being an engineer, because I'm just like, I'm trying to talk to everybody here, not just people that know what they're talking about. So my vocabulary is probably not as broad as somebody who does this for a living or what have you. But basically what I'm trying to say is, when you stack those tracks together, you're using parallel buses that are all hearing the same thing, and you affect each one of them differently. So one of my buses, like I said, has reverb. The other one has compression. The other one is standard, which has no plugins on it at all. And then the other one has my modulation. The modulation is rolled off so high, that's how you get those like phasing and swirling sounds of the cymbals without the kick drum being affected. And then I also take all 4 of my drum buses and I smash them into a drum bus over here on the right hand side. And over here, what I'll do is I'll hit it with another compressor. And the one that I'm using over here is the VCA 65 from Arturia. Now, this is like a DBX 165. And we all know that Kevin uses a stereo pair of DBX 165, the actual compressor in his rack. To sandwich his drum bus together. And it's a great plugin. You should definitely try it. But so like I said, I'm using 6 drum takes that are stacked together with multiple buses that have different plugins on them, and then I sandwich all those together into a master drum bus, and that goes out to my master bus. So there's my master drum bus, which goes out to my overall mixdown master bus. And then I'm hitting that with an additional compressor again, which is a Fairchild. Okay, so that's how you're going to get this big, fat, beefy drum sound. You want to stack compression all the way through so that you get multiple instances of a little bit of compression from each one of them, which changes the character a little bit. So let's hear it. I'm going to mute my compressor and limiter on my drum takes, on my drum buses, and I'm also going to mute my patch points, or I don't know what you would call them in a different DAW. Like, I guess it would just be a sub drum mix of some sort. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mute these three, and I'm only going to play this one. And I'm going to show you how each one of those layers is affected. So this is the 6 tracks, and this is my one drum bus. Now I'm going to add an additional one with the compression, with reverb. Now I can dial in the amount of reverb that I have. And that's with my modulation. Now you can really hear it livening up. I'll add the DBX 165. And I'm using a J37 tape modulation. And here's my master. Fairchild doing all that work. So you can see what I mean. See how stacking up those drums on your sub buses, putting them into an additional master drum bus, compressing that to glue the whole thing together, and then sending that to your stereo out master bus overall with more compression on it. You can see the stages that add it all together. That's how I get my drum sound.